Hello everyone, this is Anirban Datta, and today I'm excited to welcome you to another edition of the Geo Interview, Ukraine Between Giants, Democracy, Security, and Geopolitical Flux. As we navigate through one of the most turbulent geopolitical tr- periods in the recent history, Ukraine finds itself at the epicenter of a war that has not only redefined its domestic political landscape, but has also influenced its geopolitical as well as governance structures, decision making, and international alignments. So, to understand more about this topic and to understand Ukraine's democratic resilience, security architecture, and its place in the evolving global order, we're truly honored to have Professor Olexiy Haran, Professor of Comparative Politics at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, a leading voice on Ukrainian politics and international affairs. Professor Haran, it is a real privilege to have you here with us today. On behalf of our viewers and listeners, I extend a very warm welcome to you. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. I'll try to say Donabat. Do you understand me?
Yeah, I do to a certain extent understand you. Therefore, but to start ahead with the discussion and regarding what exactly with happening with regard to the war, I would like to ask you what exactly do you think are the reasons behind this specific war?
To put it shortly, and I believe this is a real explanation, it's the former colonial empire is trying to come back. Okay, the former colonial empire, I mean Russian Empire, which then existed in the form of the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union collapsed. Now there are 15 states, but Russia actually is trying, to restore itself as an empire. And by the way, Putin is clearly stating about that. He is saying that Ukrainians do not exist separate from Russia. Okay, so I do not exist in his mind. He still believes that Ukraine is part of great Russia. Again, he is saying that Ukrainians do not exist otherwise than being part of Russia. So you see me in my national shirt, Ukrainian one. I may speak Ukrainian language, but in Putin's mind, we do not exist as separate nations. So the former colonial empire is coming back. This is very, very important. The empire which committed many, many crimes against Ukrainians, and just by the way, banned Ukrainian language. Banned Ukrainian language. This is despite the fact that Kiev is at least 600 years older than Moscow. But for Russia, we are still, younger brother, which is not correct at all. So again, the explanation is that former colonial empire is trying to come back. Russians are talking about, official Russian propaganda is talking about the threat from NATO. Come on. By the way, do you know when the war started?
The war actually started out in February 2022. In
Okay.
the
Yes, continue.
So to basically to sum up, what we exactly saw this from the prism of India, it started in 2022. There were huge mobilizations which happened in the Belarusian border, and then afterwards the war just started, and it went on, and it's been 3 years right now.
Okay, thank you very much. But in our view, we Ukrainians, we think that the war started in 2014 when Russia attacked Ukraine, trying to annex Crimea and then starting the war in Donbass. So actually, we called it a war since that time. So now but it was, it was, how to put it, it was localized, in the east of Ukraine. But now it's a full scale invasion. So why I am mentioning this is because when Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, Ukraine was a neutral state officially. And Ukrainians, all the polls, they showed that Ukrainians didn't want to join NATO. So in fact, we want to join NATO now because of the Russian attack, you know. So there was no NATO threat from Ukraine at all. Moreover, Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal. which was the third largest in the world. Can you believe it? So British, French, and Chinese nuclear arsenal combined together. We had more after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So we gave it up in 1994 in exchange for the guarantees of our territorial integrity and our borders. It's easy to find this document. It's called Budapest Memorandum, 1994. So just put Budapest Memorandum. This is one page, actually, So it's easy to read. It's very, very clear. In exchange for our territorial guarantee. And you know who guaranteed it. So the guarantors were the United States, the United Kingdom, and guess what was the third country? Can you guess?
I leave it up to you to reveal it to our audience and to amaze us.
Okay, so the third country was Russia. So they guaranteed the borders and territorial integrity of Ukraine. So we were disarmed, we gave it up voluntarily, we were a neutral country, we didn't want to join NATO, and we were attacked. As simple as that. So, which means that Russia violates all the treaties it signed, and the main aim is to crush Ukraine. And by the way, when there was a full-scale invasion, so Putin said, "Oh, I wanna liberate Donetsk and Lugansk." What is he claiming right now? I want 5 regions of Ukraine, not 3, 5, which we consider Russian territory. So his desires increases and increases. That's why again we think that it's very clear who is aggressor, who is victim, and it's very important for us not to put it on both on the same level, okay? Because there is one aggressor and one victim. Because sometimes we hear, oh, Russian and Ukrainian people, they are so suffering. We are suffering. Russians do not live under bombardment at all. Russian territory, huge territory is not occupied. There are no repressions against Russians at all. We are suffering. So that's why we consider it's very, very important not to repeat the mistakes which were before the World War II. When actually the arguments of Hitler, I'm really sorry to say that, were the same as Putin is using right now. Again, it's easy to check, to compare the languages. Hitler was talking about Lebensraum for Germans. Okay, Lebensraum means space for living for Germans. Putin is talking about Russian world, which is basically the same.
So to start a
And if
little
you
bit,
have any questions, to object me, please do. I like provocative questions. And we are not afraid of that because, we are telling the truth, what's going on. We shouldn't invent any, propaganda thesis which are involving speechwriters. No, we are just telling the truth.
just beyond the propaganda, moving beyond what exactly the happening right now, there is a reflections with regard to Ukraine's current geopolitical positioning, which has undergone significant shifts, as you have already told, that after 2014 the neutrality and its adoption of it went away. With regard to its relationship with EU, NATO, and Russia, the relationship has evolved hugely. So, based on your comparative research, like how should we assess the war, and what exactly are the key determinants of Ukraine's foreign policy right now?
Okay, first of all, look, what was the aim of Putin? The real aim of Putin was to seize Kyiv, the capital, and to install a puppet government here in Ukraine. And his plans, around 5 days, enough, to seize Kyiv. By the way, I remember the first days of the war when I was bombarded bombarded by different, foreign journalists, TV channels, and I was on two Indian channels, and I saw the titles like Kabul failed, Kyiv is next, Kyiv is encircled. You know, so it was very, very, surprising for me to hear it, because actually you had very good journalists on the ground, Indian journalists, who were on the ground, who knew the situation, but somehow, it transformed in total different direction. So Putin failed at the beginning of the war. And now you see that it's fourth year of the war, and he cannot defeat Ukrainians. So basically, it means that we are successful in defending ourselves. But the problem is that our resources are less than Russian one, definitely. Okay, and Putin doesn't follow any rules of the war. Russia is not democracy, which means that they can send Russian soldiers to die without any counting of them. And Russians wouldn't protest because they do not know about how many Russians died or were wounded. So now it's up to 1 million. 1 million. But so it's difficult for us, and that's why we think that it was important to increase support to Ukraine, both military and also in economic sphere, to have economic sanctions against Russia. And we saw that actually Russia is exhausting itself. But then something interesting came up, like with Trump elections, and actually Trump is thinking about stopping American support. Actually, he tried to do that, but then renewed. But his general policy is a bit unclear. So he wants to reestablish relations with Russia because of business interests. He consider such people as Putin, Xi Jinping, or Kim Chen In as strong leaders, and he would like to deal with the so-called strong leaders. This is his kind of personal approach and personal understanding of world politics. We cannot say, that this policy is finalized. So actually, just a day ago, United States continued sanctions against Russia. But again, we see, different signals about from Americans, from representatives of Trump in negotiations, about how the ceasefire could be reached or how peace could be reached. Okay, and sometimes these statements are very, very strange, I would say, because again, they repeat some Russian thesis. This is difficult for us to understand. Because, for example, Mr. Witkov, who is a special representative of Trump in Middle East and also Russia. He's not professional diplomat at all. He's developer, but he is involved in this type of shuttle diplomacy with Russia, and he is saying that the problem is 5 regions of Ukraine, the problems to peace. And he even said there were referendums on these territories. Come on, there were fake referendums, which international law doesn't recognize, because how can you have free elections if your territory is occupied and the occupying power is conducting elections? So do you know what the result will be? Yes, we know what will be the result. So it was all falsifications, but this Mr. Witkov is using this Russian argument for some reason. I don't understand. I believe he simply doesn't want and doesn't understand, the region, Russia, Ukraine, in the same way, as they didn't understand what's going on in Gaza. Because Witkov declared, okay, I have agreement between Israel and Palestinians, everything would be fine. What we see right now in Gaza. No, it doesn't work at all. So American approach now, I believe, puts us in a bit complicated situation. Definitely, we hope that Mr. Trump, President Trump, will see also the reality of Russian position. So Trump said, "Okay, I'm gonna make two countries to sign a ceasefire," and then he put pressure on Ukraine, and we said, "Okay, fine, we are going to sign full-scale ceasefire," and then he moved to Russians, and Russia said no. Then, Witkoff and Trump, they declared that there is kind of ceasefire on the Black Sea, and there is a ceasefire on bombarding the electric stations, energy resources, and so on and so forth. Look what Russia is doing right now. They continue bombardment of the whole Ukraine. The whole Ukraine is under bombardment. Recently, you had huge tragedies. The last one in Sumy. This is the regional center, which is 24 kilometers from Russian borders, and they struck it with two missiles. So, center of the city. On the Palm Sunday, which is actually a Christian holiday, and Ukrainians and Russians are Orthodox. Okay, so Putin is saying he is a believer, and he, made the strike on Ukraine exactly during this religious holiday. So people were in the centers; they were going to churches. Certain people died, including 5 children, and more than 100 were wounded. Two consecutive strikes, which shows actually that Putin doesn't want ceasefire. He is now, just trying, to increase pressure and to be in a good position, for the negotiations. And actually, Trump is saying, okay, I will see the Russian approach, and if they're not going to be ready for ceasefire, I will push, I will press them. We are waiting for that. Okay, so we are waiting because Russia doesn't want ceasefire. No bombardment. So actually, we have alerts every day in Kyiv, in the capital, during night, every night, sometimes during the day also. So again, there is a hope that Trump actually will follow his own words, that he is going to press both sides. But now it seems that he is putting pressure on Ukraine, but not on Russia. Okay, we'll see. And definitely it complicates the situation for us. But we still are fighting. Because we are fighting for independence. We are fighting for freedom. And when nation is fighting for freedom, for independence, it cannot be stopped. You can judge it from the history of India as well.
So to move beyond the dialogue around peace processes and democratic processes, I just had one specific question since you actually talked about how the ordinary citizens are dealing with that you were getting updates each and every day during the war regarding missile strikes, regarding perpetual attacks. Like my question is much more on a humanitarian sense. How exactly the ordinary citizens in Ukraine dealing with this conflict currently?
Well, it's difficult, definitely. Look, since the beginning of full-scale war, every third Ukrainian had to leave its home. Every third. Okay? It has two categories. One is IDPs, internal displaced persons, and the second are refugees in Europe. So totally it's about 13 million people, one third of the country's population. So definitely it's very, very difficult, for Ukrainians. Because you have, for example, families, they are separated right now. Women with children are in Europe, and their husbands and fathers are fighting at the front line. So definitely it's very, very difficult situation. And yes, I would say that we are exhausted. we are exhausted because, physically, psychologically, it's very difficult. Fourth year of the war. But still, Ukrainians are not ready to sacrifice its freedom. Because the final aim of Putin, again, it's not about territory. It's about the fate of Ukraine. It's about making Ukraine maybe formally independent, but totally controlled by Russia. And from our history, we know what will happen. Again, now we see what's going on in the occupied territories. Everything Ukrainian is repressed. Ukrainians are in prisons, deported. Ukrainian children are deported to Russia. 20,000 Ukrainian children are deported to Russia. We are fighting, to make them come back. This is part of negotiations with the help of intermediaries with Putin. So Putin actually used the children as a bargaining chip. So definitely the situation is not easy. But we know that for us, there's no other way to defend our country.
Given
Yeah,
the current,
yes. I'm
uh,
very sincere when I'm saying that we are exhausted, psychologically, look, psychologically, it's very difficult. Physically, because actually when you hear air alarm, you need to go to shelter. But I am already, old professor, so it would be difficult for me, going back and forth, back and forth. And psychological, because we hear what's going on, how the country is bombarded, how, how many Ukrainians are losing their lives every day. So it's very difficult from psychological point of view. And frankly speaking, I would say we are frustrated when we hear that some countries are saying, okay, the responsibility is on both sides. You need to have negotiations. You need to have negotiations. What can we do about that? It's very difficult to have negotiations with crocodile, you know, who caught your legs and trying, to eat you. And then you are in the position to negotiate with this crocodile.
so given the current context, you have described about refugee issues, you've described about mass displacement, which is happening in the country. How exactly do you envision Ukraine's roadmap to peace? And is there any role for third countries like India to play an important role?
This is very good and very difficult actually questions. Because from Ukrainian perspective, the case is so clear, so clear. There are no gray arguments or gray zone. There is black and white. Aggressor is black, the victim is white. It was not provoked aggression from the Russian side in violation of all the treaties. So, and then, well, all these facts, about Russian repressions in the occupied territories, mass graves, because Russia simply, killed uh, in several places, several cities, they killed the Ukrainian population. Now it's open, to the world. So we thought that, the whole world will see it and will stay in solidarity with Ukraine. At least, the countries would vote in the UN General Assembly for territorial integrity of Ukraine. But yes, the first votes were very good. 140 countries or 43 countries sometimes, they were in favor of territorial integrity of Ukraine, denouncing Russian aggression, and about four, five countries who were supporting Russia. And then there was, a group of countries which abstained, voting for in the vote of territorial integrity of Ukraine. China, that's understandable. South Africa, And I'm really sorry to say, and India is very difficult to understand for me and for Ukrainians, because actually you had and you have, these many problems of foreign domination. You passed through British domination. You have the problems of on territorial borders with other countries, which are saying that Indian territory is their territory. You have terrorism, you had terrorism, terrorist attacks. You had separatism supported by foreign countries. So I personally thought that, okay, India will be definitely on our side and definitely denounce Russian aggression, but it didn't happen. I understand the reasons for that. First of all, there are some so-called pragmatic reasons. Okay, you need to balance China. That's why to balance China, to balance Pakistan. That's why it's important to have good relations with Russia. Now you have the cheap Russian oil, because for Russia now it's difficult to export its oil and gas to the West, to Europe. So Russia is trying to find alternative sources of supply, and they're trying, to sell it very cheap because they have no other, because they have to do that, because otherwise, the oil would not be competitive. So India is buying this cheap oil, and I understand it for pragmatic reasons. But sometimes when you need to stop aggressor, you need to stick to other approaches if you want to stop aggressor. Look, I know the history of Indian relations and Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was supporting India in fighting for independence. That's true. And Soviet Union supported India after independence. By the way, when we are saying the Soviet Union, it's not only Russia, it's also Ukraine. Ukraine, the second largest republic of the Soviet Union, was very involved in providing education for foreign students, not only India, but Africa, Asia, Latin America. And also our engineers worked in many countries, including India. So when we are saying, okay, because Moscow supported us. No, it wasn't Moscow, it was the Soviet Union, which is not equal to Russia. Okay, Soviet Union supported independence, but now Russia is not the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, at least formally, proclaimed itself to be socialist. Russia is the country of oligarchs, of savage capitalism, dictatorship. So it's totally different. So I think it's necessary also to take into account. After that, I will say that at the same time we appreciate Indian stance on some issues. For example, when Putin at the beginning of the war were involved in nuclear rattling, and he's doing that. Actually, he continues to do that. But there were strong voices from China, from India. Don't do that, and we appreciate. Prime Minister Modi said that war is not a tool to solve disputes. This is true, and we fully agree with that. But then, so how can we go out of this situation? The advice is, well, you need to talk to aggressor, you need to have negotiations. But how can we have these negotiations if the other side doesn't want to negotiate, or to negotiate on its conditions? That's the problem. And then you ask me about path to peace, right?
Paths to peace. And if it will be better if you can just give an insight into how exactly uh, Ukraine's relationship with the United States is affecting its policy.
Well, I briefly described that. Uh, I think I have said about it, because we expect actually a continuation of the pressure on Russia from the West in general and from the United States. We will be very happy if other countries, strong countries of the world, will join it. But with Trump, it's difficult. We don't know. You know that he is unpredictable, not only regarding Ukraine, regarding every country in the world. So it's very difficult to know, to forecast what he will do, what his next step will be also. As I have said, he doesn't stop support. Well, he tried it for a short period, and it was a real pressure on Ukraine. We had losses at the front line because of that. But then, he restored it. So we'll see how it will develop. But for Ukraine, the path to peace, we should to ask you, what kind of peace? What kind of peace? What Russians are saying, okay, you need to recognize that occupied territories are Russian territories. You need to be transformed into federalist state. You need to to restore the rights of the Russian Orthodox Church, which is an instrument of Russian aggression. So you need to be demilitarized, which means that we will have no arms. If Russian aggression will repeat, we will have no possibilities to defend ourselves. That's how the peace should be viewed in Russian mind. So we would be totally, how to say it, unarmed when we are talking about the continuation of Russian aggression. And we know that Russia doesn't stop. Okay, Russia wasn't stopped in Georgia. Russia continued in Syria. Russia wasn't stopped in Syria. They sent the troops to Crimea. Reaction was weak from the international community. They started the war in Donbass. And then they started the full-scale war. So if you do not stop aggression, aggressor will continue. And by the way, this is not only about Russia. This is always about aggression. Let's have a look in the history of the World War II. On the eve of World War II, the Western powers were following the so-called appeasement policy towards Hitler. Hitler was saying, okay, I need to occupy this territory. They said, okay, we will give it to you, just don't start the war. Then Hitler is occupying Austria. There was no reaction. Then there was the so-called Munich Agreement, which the Czechoslovakia gave up part of its territory, very important part. And actually, after that, because all the fortifications, military fortifications were on this part, which was ceded to Germany. Next year, Putin occupied Czechoslovakia. I'm sorry to say. Hitler occupied Czechoslovakia. Again, and there was no reaction from the West. Appeasement policy. Do not provoke aggressor. So what happened next? The World War II started, attack on Poland, and then on France. And the whole Europe is occupied. That's how appeasement of aggressor works. So we shouldn't repeat this mistake of appeasing the aggressor. If aggressor is not rebuffed, he will continue with additional strength. So instead of Russian approach, what was the aim of Ukraine? To liberate our territories from the very beginning of the war, to restore our territorial integrity. Definitely also we put forward the reparations from aggressor, punishment for those who started the aggression. Now we see that, unfortunately, look, we received support from the West, military support, and we are very thankful for that. We received actually huge support, economic and financial support, which is very important even right now. But if we are talking about military support, it was too little and too late. If we are talking economic sanctions, they were very, very gradual, very gradual. And even now, Europe is buying part of Russian gas, not all, but part of Russian gas. So now we understand that definitely because we didn't receive weapons in time. And by the way, I remember we started the civil war in Spain on the eve of World War II, when fascists, General Franco, he was supported by Hitler and Mussolini on the one side, and Spanish Republic didn't see a support from Britain and France. Why? They said, we are neutral. We do not intervene. We are neutral. So what was the result? The Republic failed. The fascism existed in Spain for 50 years. No, sorry, for 40 years. So our approach now, we understand that definitely, unfortunately, we will not see at this point the punishment of people responsible for the war. At this stage, it's very difficult, to imagine. At this stage, again, it's very difficult to see. I'm talking about the present day situation, how to liberate the territories by military means. But definitely we will not recognize, never ever, we will not recognize the occupied territories as being Russian territories. De facto, maybe we are not able right now to liberate these territories, but we will never agree to that. Because if we agree to that, that means that all the international order is destroyed. So aggressor is attacking you, taking part of your territory, and you, what do? You recognize the occupation. Is it correct approach? No. If it happens in Ukraine, then it will happen in other parts of the world. You have China, you have North Korea, you have Iran. So I'm talking now about these countries because they also have nuclear potential or close to that, so they may use it as blackmail for other countries, but it will create a very, very bad precedent for the whole international relation. So that's why we hope we have red lines which we cannot cross, and we believe that international community will understand us. I mentioned the several red lines. We cannot agree with occupation of our territory. We cannot agree with the so-called with reducing of Ukrainian army, which is the only guarantee of our security. It appears like that. These are red lines for us, and we hope the world would understand. So, if we are talking about, because we agreed for negotiation, right? We agreed for that. Okay, fine. But the problem is how you conduct these negotiations. So you need to have good cards on your side. And Putin, okay, he is increasing the stakes. He is, declaring more and more demands to Ukraine, and he is increasing bombardment of Ukraine. So what should be done from the other side and other countries which are peace-loving countries, which want to have peace, to put pressure on Putin, to stop the killing of Ukrainians, to stop bombardments of Ukraine, to reach at least ceasefire. We understand that ceasefire is not guaranteed at all because of Russia's imperialist policy. So we need to think how it may be guaranteed. This is a very difficult question. Oh, and by the way, you mentioned actually, I believe you mentioned non-allied movement, right?
There was a mention with regard to Trump's election and how exactly this is going to affect Ukraine's roadmap to peace. And if you want to speak about non-alignment movement and with its relations with Ukraine, would be grateful to have you hear your insights.
Okay, because now we are celebrating the how many 70 years of Bandung Conference, 1955, okay? We started it as students. I believe you started it as well, this conference, okay? Because it was beginning of non-alignment movement with such incredible figures like Nero, like Tito, like Sukarno, Kenyatta, and many other famous, oh, Nasser, I guess, yes. So we are talking about non-alignment movement. So it's kind of, we are not going to join any bloc. No NATO, no Warsaw Treaty, which was led by the Soviet Union. So you have neutrality. But what kind of neutrality? It's so-called active neutrality. Active neutrality means that you are not silent about aggressions. And we know in 1955, most of Africa was still, part of colonial empires, in Asia as well, Middle East. So all these countries, including India, supported the fight of the nations for their independence. Let's remind the Vietnam War. All these countries denounced American aggression, right? Yes. So this was a policy of active neutrality. So as I have said, we do not think that neutrality is to say just, okay, we are not interfering. Both sides are guilty. We are in favor of active neutrality. And because I also remember my years as a student, I remember how we were happy, about Indian successes, about liberation and then creation of Bangladesh. We will be happy. We were happy about that as students. So now I hope, again, we were supporting the fight of Latin American countries against dictatorships. We were happy about the fight and then failure of apartheid regime in South Africa. So we remember our friends, from many countries of the world. We were studying together. So I hope that now we are asking other countries, please support us. I hope for that. I know maybe it's a bit naive, but logically, why not? So I hope that the countries would participate. Okay, you're not going to be involved in economic sanctions against Russia. Please negotiate about, deported Ukrainian children. Please raise your voice against occupation of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station is the largest in Europe. Russia occupied it. Russia put arms inside this station. And this is the first time in the history of mankind when nuclear power station is occupied by foreign countries. It never happened before. So why Putin occupied? Because of one reason. It doesn't have a military weapon. Because of one reason, he is blackmailing the world with potential nuclear catastrophe there. And if it happens, what happened in Chernobyl, Chernobyl, right? Tragedy will be a child compared to that. So Putin is using it as blackmail. So why not demilitarization of this nuclear power station? This would be very, very logical. So I believe other countries may support us. Other countries may support us in securing the grain corridor from Ukraine, because Ukraine is supplying millions of tons to Africa and Asia. And also ecological problems. So these are all the result of the war. The war definitely made these problems much more risky for the whole world. Now negotiations are starting about the process of joining in different spheres. It will take time, definitely, several years, but nevertheless. And actually, we see now from Europe that Europe now, after 3 years of the war, started to understand the problems and the role of Ukraine much better than it was before. Because before this full-scale war, many Europeans they were thinking in the categories: let's have dialogue with aggressor, let's have dialogue with Russia, let's try to do something. Nothing worked, and then Russia started this full-scale war. So some politicians said, "Okay, we were wrong." German President Steinmeier said, "Okay, I was wrong when I was supporting the building of a pipeline, gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2." No, so he recognized it. And now Europe understands that, the war is coming so close to actually, the borders of the EU. The question is, who will be next? So that's why they understand that secure and stable Ukraine is in their interest. So after we see this uh, difficulties to predict the role of Trump, what he will do. So the Europe is starting, to mobilize its resources. It's more active right now, but it will take some time, because during peaceful years, actually, Europe morally and even physically demobilized itself. Okay, we have peace, there would be no war anymore, we are safe. And now, you need to have this war production, you need to increase your armies, you need to increase the spending on military budgets, etc., etc. And also Europe understands that it's necessary to increase the economic sanctions. Definitely a lot will depend on the United States, but the role of Europe is important. They started to discuss the issue of sending military mission to Ukraine. President Macron, Prime Minister Starmer, they are discussing it. It's not clear what the form will be, so we are waiting for that. But also, if we are moving to the end of our interview, I would like to stress to your viewers, we may have different interpretations of the events, okay? Anybody of us may have different view of this conflict. At personal level, at the state level, we may have different interpretations. This is fine. But the problem, even if it contradicts Ukrainian narrative, this is fine, okay? But we need to check the so-called hard facts. Hard facts are needed, to understand what's going on. And the hard facts, which nobody can deny, including Russia, because it's written in chronology, historical chronology, it's written in history books. You saw the document. Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons. This is hard fact. You cannot dismiss it. Ukraine signed the Budapest Memorandum with guarantees of territorial integrity from great powers, including Russia. This was violated. Ukraine had neutral status in 2014, and nevertheless we were attacked. These are hard facts. And now if we're moving to 2024, just look who is attacking whom. Who is bombarding the civil population? Yes, we are making our strikes on Russia, but only military objects. We are not bombarding civilians. Russia is doing that all the time since 2022. So let's check the hard fact. Let's know hard fact from history and from the recent events as well.
Thank you, Professor Haran, for sharing your insights with our team and with our viewers. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion series. We try to bring in the discussions around Ukraine's peace process, Ukraine's especially with regard to potential roadmaps to peace and how peace can be achieved in Europe. And recently, we have also hosted the NATO India Youth Conference in New Delhi, where the important points regarding Ukraine also came up. So we try to develop youth-centric perspectives around it and how exactly we can figure out a peaceful solution, and also to make sure that the foreign policies of our countries are respected, and also to make sure the peace descends on Ukraine.
Yeah, and the peace, just peace. This is also not just peace, but just peace. It's very, very important. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your interested and try to spread your knowledge about the war, about Ukraine to other audiences. Because, for many, many years, for decades, Ukraine was seen through Russian eyes, through Moscow's eyes. And just, look at Ukraine per se. So we Ukrainians, we are the nation with 1,000 years, more than 1,000, 1,000 and a half at least years of existence. We have huge cultural heritage, we have dramatic history, and we are fighting for freedom. Thank you very much. Donabad.
All of us.